Welcome, patrons. If you haven't played Dragon Age Origins, then you might not know what a golem even is, as they have sort of been ignored in recent years, as, well, much of non-elven lore has been ignored, but that's another matter. But that doesn't mean that the lore of golems has been completely ignored. So, based on a few user suggestions to talk about more dwarven stuff, and, well, golems in general, let's talk about golems. History. Golems, the giant creatures made of stone or metal and brought to life through Lyrium and controlled by a control rod, which, as its name suggests, is used to control the golem. But if the control rod breaks, or if a rod was never made, it's revealed the golem has free will, and in the case of Shale, quite the personality. Why is this? Because golems were once people, specifically they were once dwarves. This quick history lesson will be a review for some of you, but the history of the golems goes like this. The year is negative 255 ancient, 140 years into the almost 200 years of the First Blight. The Dwarven Empire has crumbled into ruin, and the Darkspawn comes closer to the gates of Orzammar, one of 4 taigs to still be standing at the time. In an effort to create the ultimate weapon, a dwarf named Caridin creates the Anvil of the Void, on which he is able to create golems. This is probably what you're thinking, so how are golems created? Which is a very good question, but it also leads into a fairly lengthy discussion, so let me finish about history real quick and I promise we will go over this. Anyway, Caridin states in his journal that early golems were made for volunteers. These men and, well, apparently Shale of House Kadash was the only female to volunteer, so a woman I guess, gave up everything to become part of the new all-golem Legion of Steel, not even asking how the process works, all for a chance to stop the Blight. The golems proved to be a major player in the victory over the Darkspawn, but it seems the Dwarven King at the time, Voltor, wanted more. He began to order people into becoming golems, criminals, casteless, and even political rivals. After 6 years of creating golems, Caridin refused to be the king's personal executor any longer, and as such, King Voltor ordered him to become a golem as well. And although he did become a golem, his apprentices doing the ritual were not able to correctly create a control rod, and Caridin kept his mind. Seeing that his tool was being used in such terrible ways, he locked away the Anvil of the Void, and it sat undisturbed for around 1,000 years. Now, there were attempts to reclaim the Anvil. In fact, Queen Getha took the entire Legion of Steel to reclaim the lost Anvil, but in the end, she just lost not only the Anvil, but herself and a large percentage of the Golem army that Caridin created. Many also tried to replicate what was done with the Golems, which is the entire plot of Golems of Amgarok. The basics of that plot is that Queen Getha left Caridin's notes with a group of researchers and a Tevinter mage to help figure out how he made golems. They decided that the best course of action was to use the corpses of casteless dwarves as the material for making the golem itself and a spirit from the Fade instead of a dwarven life being taken away. This obviously didn't go as planned, and Caridin's research was lost as well. I also want to interject here saying that this is why Orsino turns into a harvester at the end of Dragon Age 2. It seems he is using blood magic to summon some spirit of the Fade and using the bodies of his fellow mages as armor, just like what they did in Amgarok. As Orsino has been known to study some rare and unusual magic, I actually wouldn't be surprised if he knew what had happened in Amgarok. But anyway, back to golems. Eventually, Paragon Branka takes her entire house with her to find the Anvil of the Void, and although she actually does find it, ends up killing her entire house. When her warden comes along, they have the choice to either side with Branka to save the Anvil or side with the newly found Paragon Caridin, who begs the warden to destroy his terrible creation, for he is unable to. At this point, history depends on you. If your warden destroyed the Anvil, then it's revealed that some expert smiths found the ruin of the Anvil and tried to recreate the process, creating another golem with the Fade spirit bound inside that ended up killing a bunch of people, and only then it was deemed not a good idea to create golems. If your warden did not destroy it, then it depends on who is the ruler. If you chose to murder his brother over Hairmount, then he mirrors King Voltor's rule, sending people Branka's way to be made into golems. Again, Branka grew tired of creating golems for him, and she sealed herself in the deep roads with an army of golems, Balin eventually giving up taking back the priceless artifact due to her powerful army. If you chose the outdated traditionalists over Balin, then he also begins to give dwarven lives to the Anvil, but eventually finds the practice immoral. He states that no more dwarven souls can be fed to the Anvil, so Branka begins to kidnap humans and elves for the practice. This eventually led to a small war between Orzammar and Ferelden, and the gates of the city being sealed away, and the city becoming even more isolated than ever. And apparently, Branka is still kidnapping humans and elves to continue her craft. Creation. So here's where I think golems become super interesting. How is a golem created? Caridon himself writes this in his journal. These brave warriors come to me naked as the day they were born. I dress them in a skin of armor so large it makes the burliest look no more than a babe, the anvil their first and final cradle. We are surrounded by a mile of earth on all sides. No one hears the screams as I pour molten lyrium through the eye holes, the mouth, every joint and chink in the armor. They silence quickly, but the smell lingers, just a trace of blood and the greater stench of hot metal. I must work fast. The armor is malleable now as I shape it with hammer and tongs. It is not long before it moves beneath my hand, writhing and twisting with every blow. It speaks again now, a low moan, but I have learned to tune it out. I can afford no error in this craft. There can be no melted slag blinding the eyes, nor an unhewn bit of granite shackling the leg. They groan at my work, but would they rather be broken, crippled? Those I have spoken to tell me of the pain, but could they see themselves, they would see perfection. In short, place a living being inside a hunk of stone, pour in molten hot lyrium over them, and shape as needed. That is a golem. This brings up 100 different questions to me, but I want to go over 2 specific points here, one being properties of lyrium and the other the sha-brytol. Properties of lyrium. I want to keep this short because lyrium deserves its own video, but lyrium has been used a lot with memories. Think of how the dwarven shaper uses lyrium to keep memories, or how lyrium can preserve Liliana's memory into basically being a new person. So what I am theorizing here is that magic in a golem works like this, and we will use Shale as an example. We do not meet Shale Kadash. We meet a hunk of lyrium that has our memories in it. This goes into the debate on if a robot can think, act, and talk like you. Is it you? Is the Justinia we meet in the Fae Justinia if it looks, acts, and sounds like her, and can send sentimental messages to Liliana like her? Shale's new quest, as stated in the Book of Sunder, is to try and find if she can become a dwarf again. While I don't know if that is possible, and the body of Shale does lie somewhere within her rock body, there might be 2 Shales, the dwarf and the golem. Golem Shale might never be able to become a dwarf again because she was technically never one to begin with. Or I'm just thinking too much about it, and her spirit is somewhere buried within the lyrium, but whatever. The sha-brytol. So I don't have much to say on this, as honestly we only have questions, but I want you to hear this. Written by Volta after she connects, I guess, to the Titan. Only one chamber provided anything of interest to me. A domed circular courtyard held a pool of the Titan's blood at its center. Empty suits of armor sat neatly in a circle around the pool. Is this where the sha-brytol come to be entombed in their metal skins? What smiths make this armor, and where does it come from? Now, we know that Titan's blood is lyrium. So, if a sha-brytol is a dwarf in a metal suit bounded together by lyrium, how is this different from a golem? Well, yes, the terrible burning to death on molten lyrium, as at least the pool described here, is not mentioned as being hot, so it might be more like a bath than being burned alive, but the process might be very similar. And if this is the case, perhaps Caridon got the idea of the golems from the sha-brytol. And that, dear patrons, is all we know on golems. Do you still have lingering questions, proof that I'm wrong, comments about your own fan theory? Feel free to tweet me at @Gilderthon on Twitter or send a PM to user Gillenlon on Reddit. Duress Sherall.